I'm AnnMaria De Mars, President of 7th Generation Games and a Professor of Engineering and Computing at National University. Please excuse my messy office. This was not exactly the presentation I had planned, but a lot of things haven't gone according to plan for most of us lately, so instead of coming to you in Pier, I'm coming to you from my office. And that disruption of plans is pretty much the new normal. Motivating and educating with educational software in the new normal. My cousin, who's a fourth grade teacher, says that getting ready to go back to school this fall, she feels like she should be able to teach remotely or in a classroom or blended with half of her students in the classroom and half of her students learning at home while riding a unicycle and juggling alarm clocks while you're riding the unicycle, and all while your desk is on fire. So, if that's how it feels to you getting ready to go back to school this fall, know that you're not alone. I decided to ask the very best teacher I knew in the very best situation to let me know what he did when he was suddenly presented with the need to work from home. So this teacher had 17 years of experience, 16 of it at the middle school level where he teaches. He has a bachelor's degree in computer science and a PhD in education. So if anybody was prepared to do a work from home at the sort of last minute, it would be him. And personally, he only has to do lesson plans for one class. Unlike some teachers I know who might have 5 or 6 preps in a week, he teaches 8th grade algebra just 1 hour after the next. He doesn't have any kids of his own at home. He lives a 10-minute walk from his school, and his only after-school activity that he does is the math club. And I mention this because it means that whether or not you agree that teachers should have to do stuff on their off hours till who knows how late at home, that he at least has the flexibility, the ability to do it. And he also teaches in a district where 90% of the students in high school take the ACT, and their average score is on the 30th percentile. So not great, but I have certainly been in worse districts. So 1 week of math class, I can guarantee you every day for his class look like this. But there are online lessons, and then there's alternate lessons for students who might not be on the internet. 3 days a week, there's a virtual meeting where he's there speaking with his students for an hour. For those 3 Google Meet sessions each week, if the students can't make them, then they're recorded. And so they're online for them to watch. He also has additional videos that he's put up to explain additional information about algebra. The students have access to an online textbook. And there's also practice problems that go along with it. So they can read their assignments online and do the problems. They have homework problems that are online and they're automatically graded. They also have assignments that the teacher posts where he goes step by step through how to solve each problem. And yet, with all of this, there are problems. And the number one problem that he mentioned was participation. The students just didn't do it. The number 2 problem that the teacher experienced, cheating. Students used apps like Photomath and Mathway to look up the answers online. Having students show your work doesn't help because these apps actually show the steps. All the student has to do is take a picture of the math problem and the apps show the steps. Send the screenshot from their phone to the teacher, homework done. Interactive games cut down on the cheating problem as students register with their own username and password and earn points that they can use within the game. To maximize participation, watch what students do. I never would have guessed that this activity where students do math problems to earn a dog and get accessories for it would have been the most popular one in our game, but it is. And customizing their wigwams an educational activity in itself. Cultural activities can be somewhat incidental, like students hearing the language in a game or seeing everyday objects that were used in this case, Ojibwe life, and learning about how those were used. Of course, you can always teach culture more directly.
After a battle or exploit, the people of the tribe would gather together to recount their acts of bravery and count coup. Coup was recorded by putting notches in a coup stick. Indians of the Pacific Northwest would tie an eagle feather to their coup stick for each coup counted, but many tribes did not follow this tradition. There were honors for counting coup. The greatest honor was the first person to do it, then the second, third, and fourth. Why were Indians allowed to count coup on a dead body? Because he might be just pretending to be dead. Sometimes 3 warriors in a row will come up and count coup on a body, and the 4th time, the warrior rolls over and kills the enemy. He was just plain dead.
Earlier this year, along with Juliana Taken Live and Maria Burns-Ortiz, I was part of the National Science Foundation I-Corps project that traveled through 27 cities in 7 states and talked to 124 educators, all of them from Title I schools. And if you are one of those people, let me just say right now, thank you very, very much. Out of those interviews, we identified a number of things that teachers need. One is the ability to accommodate student differences in ability. Another was to accommodate student differences in access to the internet. To integrate student culture into the classrooms was really important to a lot of teachers, and to have standards-aligned curriculum. They also felt the need to monitor student performance when learning from home, and maintain student engagement when learning from home, which, as we saw, even with the very best teachers is an issue. And maintain engagement of all students in the classroom when they're teaching in small groups. So they would have one student that perhaps was not paying much attention when the teacher was trying to teach another group of students. So maintaining that constant attention was an issue, keeping time on task. And also maintaining student engagement despite, for many students, having multiple trauma at home, having other issues to cope with, more important to them than learning how to multiply fractions. When, for example, they don't know where they're going to be sleeping tonight because the family is homeless and moving from one relative to another. So our challenge was to identify optimal situations for online, blended, and in-class learning and make those as much as possible available for every teacher. One of the solutions to all of these problems can be educational games. Why educational games? Well, you can reduce cheating because, as I noted, students want to get the points for themselves. It can increase participation because, as we'll see in a minute, games can be intrinsically interesting. You can also integrate culture and language, even if the teacher doesn't speak the language or is not expert on the culture, by including games that were done with those cultural experts. Because so much of what we saw over the first 2 months of this year with educators was dealing with students who had to deal with multiple types of trauma, who were faced with really challenging situations, from being exposed to drug abuse to not knowing how to set a budget or manage money, to being in situations where they were at risk of child abuse. We thought it was super important to develop games for decision making. It's just not feasible to ignore the trauma, the challenges socially and emotionally that students face on a daily basis. Teachers need data. It's just a fact, and it's more of a fact when you have students learning remotely. How do you know how much they're studying? How do you know what they're doing? How do you know if they did it themselves? How do you know if they got it right? And finally, it would be super helpful if there were educational resources, both for teachers to integrate games with their lesson plans, with their existing curriculum, and for parents to use at home. So let's take a look at some examples that meet all of these solutions. Start students playing games, you should start at their grade level. whatever their grade level should be. I disagree. I start students at the easiest level. Now, not necessarily here, which is counting by 2 languages, which is about the kindergarten level, but if I have students in, say, middle school, 5th, 6th, 7th grade, I'll probably start them with Spirit Lake Beginnings Lakota, which is a really cool game. You can play in English or Lakota, or the Making Camp series. All these games teach multiplication and division. Now, why would I do that? No, I wasn't always a professor. I used to teach middle school, and occasionally I still do teach middle school in the summer or as a guest lecturer for my friends. Yes, I substitute teach. And I believe what Erik Erikson said, which is that for most kids, it is better to be bad than stupid. So if a student feels like they're behind the rest of the class, it's not at all unlikely that they will act out. If I can start all of my class at the same level, even if it's something like Spirit Lake or Making Camp, all of the kids will like it because the games are fun. And the kids who are more advanced will whip through those games fairly fast and be at a higher level quick enough. But they will have had a good time. And there's far worse things for a kid than to start thinking that math is easy. The students who maybe have greater needs, they will take longer to get through those games. They will also have a great time. And when you teach special ed, one of the things that you're supposed to be doing is providing age-appropriate instruction. And very few things are more age-appropriate for upper elementary and middle school kids than playing video games. So you find you have fewer behavior problems because the kids like what they're doing. The kids who are at grade level or above will kind of whip through those games, but they will have a good time. The kids who are below grade level won't feel as bad because they started out with everybody else, like all the other kids. And they got to shoot the wolves, and they got to do all that stuff too. And okay, maybe it will take them a little bit longer. I really strongly believe that any game that supposedly teaches math, especially if kids are learning offline, should have some direct teaching of math, not just asking problems. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about.
Perimeter. You've probably heard the word perimeter before. Maybe in an action movie or a show where someone's trying to do something like protect a fort, and one guy says to another, "We've got to secure the perimeter." And the other guy says something like, "Yes, sir." But what is perimeter? Perimeter is the distance around an object, whether it's an army base, or an apartment building, or a garden, or a square, or a triangle, or a city, or a star. Not those kinds of stars. Not those kind. That kind. You can get the perimeter of anything that has borders, sides, or edges that you can measure. To find the perimeter, you measure along the outside of an object. You add up the length of all those sides, and the sum is the perimeter. For example, if you're trying to find the perimeter of a tent, you would need the measurements of each side. Let's say the tent is a rectangle, with the longer sides being 25 feet each, and the shorter sides being 15 feet each. We add all 4 sides, which is 25 plus 15 plus 25 plus 15, and we get 80 feet. That's the perimeter. Let's try again. Say we want something bigger. How about the perimeter of the Pentagon, home to the headquarters of the U.S. Department of Defense? The Pentagon happens to be a pentagon, meaning it has 5 sides. We take the length of each side. In this case, each side is 921 feet. Add that together 5 times. 921 plus 921 plus 921 plus 921 plus 921 to get 4,605. Or, since each of the sides is the same length, we can multiply the length of one side 5 times. 921 times 5 equals 4,605. Either way, we get the perimeter. Okay, that was big. Let's try something a little smaller. Let's say we're trying to measure the perimeter of a slice of pizza cut into a triangle. We take the 3 sides, 6 inches, 4 inches, and 4 inches, add them together, and you've got lunch. A perimeter of 14 inches. This method works to find the perimeter of any shape with unrounded edges, but not circles. But we'll talk about that another time.
As somebody who has been a math teacher for a long time, for everything from middle school through doctoral students, and who also makes games, I can tell you that most educational games have a real problem. Educational games need to be, at a bare minimum, two things. They need to be fun, because that makes them a game, and most educational games are not. They're made by people who have PhDs in, say, education or computer science, and they just aren't very much fun to play. And then the second kind of games are not very educational. They're made by people who have gaming companies, or they're really big gamers themselves, and they're great games, but as somebody who's a math teacher, I look at it, I say, where is the math in this thing? So educational games need to be educational and games. The other thing that would be really, really, really super fabulous, if like frosting on the cake, would be if you could integrate more than one subject. Let's face it, when we're talking about Title I schools in particular, very often you have students who are behind academically. So for them to catch up, you need to teach them more than a year's worth academically in a year, where by definition they wouldn't be behind if they hadn't been learning less than a year's worth every year. So how do you do that? Well, one way would be if you could teach multiple subjects at once. So if you could teach social studies at the same time as you taught math, or you teach language arts at the same time you taught social studies, or you could teach math at the same time you taught English. Well, I'm sure you get the idea. So if you could do that, that would be fabulously fabulous. And because culture, I believe, is an important thing for kids, an important part of who they are, if you could integrate culture along with teaching math, along with teaching language, say, along with also making a really fun game, boy, that would be something that you could get kids to play at home, or you could get them to do in the classroom. And that's thank you to the U.S. Department of Agriculture and now the National Institutes of Health, which has funded our research, what we've been doing for the last several years. Okay, awesome. Why did we put all that effort into making such a super cool game? I think it's fun. Well, because if kids are really into playing it, then if they get one of those math problems that just kind of popped up there wrong, then they have to go and learn whatever it is that they need to know to continue playing the game. And this has been even more effective in the last few months when kids are pretty much stuck at home. Here you have a free game. It counts as school. Mom is on your case anyway. And so you may as well learn about these time, rate, and distance problems. Oh, cue the middle school eye roll. And if you have raised middle school children, you know what I'm talking about. The yes. So within games, you ought to have some kind of direct teaching. So here's another example of that, where the students are playing the game, they failed at one of the math challenges, and now to get back into the game, they have to learn something. How far away is the camp? Don't you just hate problems like this? My daughter hates those rate and distance problems. If you go 20 miles an hour and you're traveling for 11 and a half days, how long is it until your mother yells at you for not doing your homework? Blah, blah, blah. It comes up all the time, though. How far is it from your school to the field where you are playing soccer? How many hours does it take to get from here to Aunt Nina's house? Personally, I like to understand what's going on. I like to know how long it takes to get places, so that I don't accidentally show up at the wrong house at 3 o'clock in the morning. Here's the problem. The Aztecs are being attacked by Spanish soldiers. They are trying to figure out how far away the main Spanish army is camped so they can launch a surprise attack during the night. How to solve it? First, figure out how many hours they traveled. The problem says they rode 2.5 days without stopping. Yes, that was terrible for the poor horses. Use number bonds to find the number of hours. In one day, you have 24 hours. And in another one day, you have another 24 hours. One day equals 24 hours, you know that. There's 2.5 days. So in 0.5 days, half a day, you have 12 hours. Add the hours. 24 plus 24 plus 12 equals 60 hours. Multiply the hours by the rate. 60 hours times 5 miles per hour. Well, 5 times 0 is 0, so there's a 0. 5 times 6 is 30, so there's the 30 after that. And the answer is 300 miles. I'm sorry to tell you this, but it looks like you do. Where I have argued with a lot of people, including some federal funding agencies, is I don't believe that it's possible to overlook the social, emotional challenges in kids' lives. Some of the challenges that kids face, multiple traumas, and say, well, let's just put that all over here and teach algebra. I just don't think that's feasible. So I want to give credit where it is completely due. This idea all came out of the 3 affiliated tribes, the Mandan, Hidatsa, Riccara Nation. Bruce Gillette, who was the director of the Circle of Life, the substance abuse prevention and treatment program on the reservation at the time, said to me, you guys make these games where you have a scenario, something comes up, you've got to meet your other tribe 6 days ride away, what's the fairest place to meet? How about coming up with those same scenarios and developing a game for decision making? For if kids are at home and there's a party and there's somebody giving them kind of that creepy vibe and they don't see their parents around, what do? Or if you threw a party yourself and there's no adults around, it's kind of getting out of hand, what do? Or if you need to get your first job, move out of the house, you want to get your own place, how do you figure that out? So you can make games, and I think this is an area that's very underutilized, where you can make games to teach decision making. Now, if you're in a classroom, I also believe that that's one of the areas where teachers are underappreciated, that they are often the one caring person, significant other in a child's life, and they give them advice. But what if you can't be there because school's online now? Or what if you want to be there, but you have 5 other kids that need your help right now? So I think games are an area that can be used for some of those social, emotional, decision-making, life planning skills, and they haven't been utilized there enough. So let's take a look at a couple of those, supported by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Thank you very much.
They say that life is about the journey, not the destination. Sometimes you know where you're going, and sometimes you get lost. Sometimes we find ourselves looped back in places where we don't want to be. But that doesn't mean we have to stay there. or that we can't change the route we take next time. They say that life is about the journey, not the destination. Where you go from here is up to you.
We're so proud of you for getting a new job. It looks like you're really turning your life around.
Hey, haven't seen you in forever. Hang out tonight? Party at Casey's.
Pick your reply.
Surprise! We were driving by and said, let's stop. Come out with us. It's been too long. It's almost like you think you're too good to hang out with us. Which way do you want to go?
Cool party.
It looks like everyone in town is here.
Do you even know all these people?
Your parents are out of town and you had a party. It has gotten out of control. What should you do next?
Come on, be cool. Everyone is having fun.
Is that a rat?
Worse, it's a gopher. We kinda have a gopher problem.
You have 1 minute to get those gophers. Squash gophers by tapping them.
Which way do you want to go?
In good news of the day, the Crossroads games are available for free at www.thejoygroup.com/crossroads. Available through funding from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. What all of these games have in common is a certain format. They have learning that occurs in context. There's a scenario presented, whether it's finding another tribe with which you're going to trade, fishing, or some other problem where math is relevant or the language you're learning is relevant. Then they answer a question and the correct answer leads to gameplay. It may be points that they can spend or it may be an adventure game. And wrong answers lead to educational resources like some of the ones you already saw about the time, rate, and distance problems or perimeter. So it's not just test, but there's also teaching going on. So that's what I would argue is the optimal for learning, whether it's individualized learning or learning from home. Well, let's look at two very different games that use that same format. Games that are used both in the classroom for individualized learning and games that can be used at home.
The Dakota that lived on the plains were known as the Teton Sioux, and to them, the buffalo was their most important possession.
As you see here, as I mentioned previously, games can also integrate culture and allow those teachers who are not experts in the language or the culture to provide that information to their students by providing them software that was developed in collaboration with those experts so the students, whether they're in school or at home, can have access to that knowledge. And here you can see the exact same principles applied in a very different type of game.
The brothers meet in the middle and find their grandfather on the shore of the lake.
So you're going fishing. Do you think you can catch some pike? I feel like eating pike today.
This is a pike. What fraction of the fish are pike?
I know we've run through a lot of games in a super short period of time. You can also find a lot more games here at www.sevengenerationgames.com. But now I want to talk about what you need in addition to games. All right, you've got the games, but now what? How do you get them useful in your classroom? Okay, games are great. We all agree on that. But are kids actually playing them? So the next thing you need is data to see if kids are actually playing the games, that whole participation thing, and are they actually learning anything? Related to that, I would say, are educational resources for educators, for teachers and parents. Because if it's really difficult to access the data or it's really difficult to incorporate it in your existing lesson plan curriculum, people aren't going to do it. Of what I think are somewhat easy, user-friendly teacher reports. This one is for the Fish Lake game that you just saw. So all I need to do is type in the student's username, which as the teacher or parent I should have, and this tells me that this was me. I'm a little bit of a lazy slacker. I only did 2 problems, but I got both of them correct. Here was my answer. I got them both correct on the first try, and here's the date that I answered it. So you can tell I haven't done anything since May 13th. I am a lazy little kid. And there's a hint with each of these problems that the student, we kind of went through that really quickly, but if you looked on the page, they could have it explained to them. And I didn't need to have it explained to me. But if this says no, and I got it wrong, then you could say to me as a teacher, well, when you go back and do it again, click on that explain it button and watch the educational resource that's there. I could also here get information on what standards are taught in this game. So I know that these first 2 problems that the student completed were this standard, understand a fraction of 1 over b is the quantity formed by 1 part, and so forth. This was another standard, understand a fraction a over b is a multiple of 1 times b. So all of that stuff should be available for a teacher, in my opinion, in educational resources that go with games. Now we looked at the decision-making games. So here's an example of the reports for them. Obviously, I don't want to give you private information for students, so these are all really me that did it as an example. So did I complete any of these on driving under the influence of drugs? No, I didn't. I didn't do the one on unsupervised teen parties. I did do the one on budgeting. So you could scroll down and see what the student completed. There's a section on motivational interviewing, and this tells me the student answers what he or she, since it was me, it's a she, identified as good things about the situation, what they identified as bad things, what they identified as things that the player could change. These are measures of depression and adverse childhood events, which I hadn't done yet. If I had done them, you would see the scores over here. 7 Generation Games. How to use our teacher reports. If you have a school or classroom license, you will get a link to the teacher report site. Email info@sevengenerationgames.com if you need this link. Next, register. Just make up a username and password. With teachers learning offline as well as students, this is the type of tech support they need that's accessible anywhere and standalone. After you've registered, log out and log back in to add students. To add students, click the Add Students button. You can add usernames for your students one at a time. To add another student, click the Add More button. Just keep it up till all your students are entered. If you added too many lines, just click the Remove button to remove that line. When you've entered all your student usernames, click Submit. Where's Gonzalo? If you enter a username that doesn't exist in the database, it's not going to be added to your class list. Only usernames that exist in the database will be added. Click on a username to show student progress. You'll be able to see how many sessions the student played, for how long, what games they played, how many points they got. You can go back and add or remove students at any time just by clicking the Add Students button. Teachers already had too much to do, and the current uncertainty has only made that worse. So any software that's going to be used in the classroom has to recognize this fact. Most teachers are not going to be like our best case scenario teacher, where they have the time and the technology to develop multiple lesson plans for every class every day. The more prepared resources there are, from having standards-aligned curriculum to ready-made lesson plans to PowerPoints or videos that teachers can use in their classroom, the more likely those activities or games are going to be used, whether it's with kids at home or in individualizing instruction in the classroom. The easier it was, or is, to integrate something into my classroom, the more likely I am to use it. And I particularly like resources that I can use that go with, say, a particular textbook or software. So you can go to the 7generationgames.com site, and in there is a page on 7 ways that teachers can use the resources, everything from automatically pulling up your student scores, as we saw with the data, to pre and post tests to track progress. But my favorite is the learning materials. So let's take a look at a couple of examples. So here we've got Making Camp. We can look up PowerPoints and PDFs. So here's a bunch of them on problem solving. Okay, building a model is one way to solve a problem, and goes through here with specific examples. It's available in PDF or PowerPoint, and it's also available in English and Spanish. There's also a little bit more advanced resources, say in the Aztec series. So there's one on distributions, there's another one on how to compute a median, what it is, how you get one, an example. I really strongly believe that students need a lot of examples, so there's PowerPoints. There are also videos that go with each game. So you could go in, let's pick a different game this time, Forgotten Trail. There's a video on converting kilometers to miles, another one on the average, another one on the metric system. And all of those you can find on the 7 Generation Games YouTube channel. There's a bunch of playlists organized by culture, Lakota culture. There's one on Ojibwe culture and clans. There's another one on the Aztecs. So those are available, as well as anything on math, because I love math. So those are all linked from the 7 Generation Games site. Now, something that's not very open to the public, but I will tell you, there is also a site called teacher.7generationgames.com that has educational resources. So these include not only videos, but also lesson plans. So let's take a look at this one, say multiplication. It mentions the games that are available and also lesson plans. So we saw one on finding the perimeter earlier, right? And this gives, for each lesson plan, the standards taught, what devices or supplies you need. So in this case, a piece of paper, a pen or pencil, a phone, and Making Camp Premium, which you can get online or through iOS or Android devices. And if you have a measuring device, like a ruler, measuring tape, or yardstick, that would be nice, but it's optional. And then this is an activity we really like. This was super popular with kids when they were learning from home, that they could go around the house. After they watched this perimeter video, they would make a table like this with their pencil and piece of paper. And if you didn't know, now you know, almost every phone has a measuring device on it. So they'd go out and they would measure 10 rectangles in their house. So this actually got them to run around the house, write things down, and then they watch an additional video on perimeter. So this is clearly something you could do in your school, or it's something that children could do learning from home. And this teacher resource site has right now math and social studies, we're adding more all the time. There's soon going to be an English language arts and an ESL section. So I hope that you find it really useful. We set it up for you through funding that we received from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. So that's all of the things that I had to tell you today. So I hope you've found this presentation helpful. You can contact me anytime. I'm AnnMaria De Mars. You can reach me at AnnMaria at 7, that's the number 7, generationgames.com. You can hit me up on LinkedIn, follow me on Twitter at AnnMariaStat. You can follow me on Instagram at AnnMaria7Gen. You can't follow me on TikTok because I'm not cool enough to be on that. All of these examples today that I gave were from 7th Generation Games because I'm most familiar with that, but I do believe that all of these principles apply to any educational software you want to include in your classroom. And my youngest daughter told me that I'm supposed to end this with, and thank you for coming to my TED Talk.